Yo, it's Kim and it's almost 2018 and you're in the market for a camera, so it's time to consider 4K seriously. Or is it? I watched Blade Runner 2049 and I happened to notice it was presented in 4K. Big deal, right? Well, to tell you the truth, I couldn't tell the difference between that and 1080p. But why is that? Today we're gonna run through a no BS video about the value of 4K and whether it's something you should seriously consider, whether you're just starting out or considering to do this professionally. So firstly, what is 4K? 4K is just a bigger resolution than 1080p. To be more precise, it's about 4 times larger than the area of 1080p. That's really all there is to it. 4K is like having 4 1080p videos on one screen. Let's start off with the bad news. 4K is thick, like it is 4 times bigger than 1080p. The working file sizes for the YouTube videos I make are usually about 10 to 15 gigabytes per video. If I record in 4K, it usually gets up to about 50 gigabytes per video. Think about that, if you record in 4K 10 videos in, you're probably using around 500 gigabytes worth of storage. Alternately, if you were just recording in 1080p, you'd have almost 50 videos. The second thing is system speed. Now, everything you're probably working on right now might need to be upgraded. This includes your CPU, your GPU, your monitor, and as we talked about in the last point, your storage. Furthermore, not all 4K is created equal, so just because your smartphone can record in 4K doesn't mean it's going to record as much detail as, say, something like a Lumix G7, GH4, GH5. Having said that, the amount of detail you're going to record is definitely going to increase even if you record in 4K and export in 1080p, but just remember that sharpness and detail aren't everything. Now moving on to the good news, whenever you record in 4K, there's definitely going to be more detail. This is simple, there's more data, there's more detail. Now the biggest advantage for me is being able to crop after the fact. What this means is you can crop in your 4K footage and export in a smaller resolution without losing any detail. Typically I like to use this for interviews so I can get away with reframing subjects after the fact or get multiple camera angles from one camera. In fact, lots of YouTube channels are actually doing this now. If you have a look at any recent Crash Course video, you'll see what I mean. I'll link some of those videos down below just for reference. So, do you need to buy a 4K camera in 2018? Well, if you're just starting out and not doing this professionally, I don't think it's necessary. The file sizes and the render times alone will maybe not make it worth the trouble, but if you wanted to record the most amount of detail for, say, something like your baby's first steps, then maybe, yeah, sure. Just remember you may need to upgrade some of your hardware just to watch some of that 4K content. But you know, if you tell yourself it's inevitable anyway, then you kind of convince yourself. Now, if you think about going pro or making this a serious hobby, well then yes, it's worth it. Just remember all the hardware you're gonna need to upgrade and all the costs associated with having a 4K workflow. Because as a hero once said, with greater size comes greater responsibility, or some shit like that. Now, if you think about becoming a serious YouTuber, YouTube seems to be pushing a lot of 4K content, or so I hear, but nobody really knows the algorithm. I doubt any one person at Google actually knows the algorithm either, but there's that. Also, fun fact, this isn't just limited to YouTube. If you're submitting shows to something like Netflix actually requires the minimum resolution of your shows to be 4K these days, so if you're thinking about going that route, take this into account. Now, if you think about shooting independently for clients, you can actually charge clients more if you're shooting and exporting in 4K. Lastly, another thing to consider is all the other things you should probably look for in a camera. Things like color science, slow motion, form factor, all these things play an important role in deciding your next camera. However, one thing really sticks out to me, and that's good video autofocus. Now, this probably deserves its own video, but the summary of it is this. Some video autofocus is so good that you can rely on it on pro shoots that it's really changed the game. Maybe even more so than 4K. So in summary, 4K is great, but I don't think it's necessary. For shoots that I have, I use it sparingly and I use it intentionally. Now, as someone who keeps up with tech and is a little bit anal about sharpness sometimes, I couldn't even tell the difference in the latest Blade Runner. Also, as somebody that's already using a 4K camera, it's useful, but if I were starting out again today, I'd probably choose a camera with better autofocus, but that's just me. Lastly, in 2018, more and more people are gonna be watching 4K content, but just remember, there's still a big transition ahead of us. Mainly content creators upgrading their systems to create 4K content, and then consumers upgrading their hardware to keep up. This is much longer than I expected. I hope it wasn't too confusing. I just know that if I was starting out today, this would be one of the main questions I'd have without a doubt. As usual, I hope you found this useful. Have a great week.